welcome to another edition of the Shaltazar podcast. My name is Jeffery Eisen, the channeler of Shaltazar, a spiritual life coach and an energy intuitive. My guest today is Nadia Kim, all the way from Baltimore, Maryland. Welcome, Nadia, and thank you so much for joining us on the Shaltazar podcast today.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here, and hello to all your listeners. It is a pleasure to be connecting with everybody. As you said, my name is Nadia Kim. I'm originally from Southern Maryland, and I'm a holistic wellness practitioner, Reiki master, intuitive that guides people to finding their inner truths and empowering them to heal themselves. So I'm really happy to be here.
Fabulous, fabulous. And Nadia, I believe, is representative of a lot of the new light workers that have come forth, that they have these special gifts. And I don't know about you, Nadia, but sometimes it's difficult for us to explain to others what it is we do and what our modalities are. We know them, we understand them, and we know that we're here to share them and make the world a better place. And so I encourage listeners to just tune in to the energy of the light workers, tune in to the people who are trying to help you, and don't get too hung up on their titles. Get attracted to the people that feel right to you, and don't worry about their modality. Would you agree with that, Nadia?
I completely agree with that. In fact, I was working with a student yesterday who was becoming attuned to Reiki level 1. And she said, I realized that you didn't get a chance to get to know who I was before I decided to ask you to be my teacher. And I said, honey, hold on. And then I pulled out this paper and I showed her, I said, read this. And it said, when the teacher is ready, the student will appear. And I said, what you have to understand is that our souls connect to each other. And it's more important that we feel into the energy of one another and decide that that's who we want to work on based on that, other than looking for some specific title, as you say, because a lot of times the healing that's happening, really, it's all on an energetic level.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I know an awful lot of light workers, and I went through this at the beginning of my journey. They struggle because they think they need some sort of certification, they need some sort of authentication that they are a healer. And I know Shaltazar has led me to believe on numerous occasions that we don't need that certificate. We don't need anything to prove. All we need to do is show up with our gift. Often they say, just show up and we will give you the words to use. And I think that's important for people to realize. I forget, because I began my journey probably about 15 or 16 years ago, and I forget how confusing it was for people embarking on their journey to find the right path, to find the right teachers. And you are so right, that when the student is ready and when the teacher is ready, they come together. And it's really important that we follow our intuition a lot more. I think there's an opportunity in this new calibration of energy that's out there, that we tap into our intuitive sense and follow that a lot more.
Absolutely. And I think that, too, a lot of people kind of don't understand what that means or how to do it. And it's really like conversations you and I have had before. It's really about feeling it. It's like what feels good. If you're around a person and they just feel good to be around, and they tell you that they, have modalities that can help people, then that's your intuition. That's your soul saying, hey, this resonates. And, and sometimes I think people are looking for something externally magical to happen, like fireworks to go off or some sparkly Tinkerbell, to happen when it's the right person. And I think that that's our own ego that's kind of crafting some idea, and it actually creates a block for us from actually really connecting in a meaningful way.
Right. I would agree. And Shaltazar says on numerous occasions that there is no absolute truth in the human realm. There is only relative truth, that absolute truth only exists in the higher realms. And so therefore there is no be all and end all. There is no one modality. There is no one teacher for you. Allow your inner guidance to guide you. And that is so powerful. And, kudos to all of the light workers that are stepping up, but it's very confusing for the seekers because there's so many of us all coming from our heart, all trying to do the best we can to help shift the planet. But for the seekers, it's really confusing. And in some cases, those healers have been taken, I don't want to say taken advantage of, by people who are in sales and marketing saying, I can get you all kinds of clients and here's the way to do it. To us healers, we need to do what's right. We need to share our wisdom and share our offerings in a way that is consistent with who we are. And the seekers need to be able to find us from that authenticity.
You're right. And actually, it's funny that you brought that up because the past couple of weeks, I've really been trying to get to a point of shift with, moving to a space of allowing in my business. And I finally got there where it was like something just clicked in me where I said, you know what? I really need to just, in my business, I was doing it in my personal life, following my happiness, but in my business, I was still trying to help everybody. And I realized at the end of it all that I need to just do what makes me happy. And doing what makes me happy has to be my focus. And that how people are affected by that in an amazing, wonderful way is the most wonderful, positive side effect that could happen from it. Yesterday was Mother's Day, and I'm a mother of 3, and I had my Reiki student was like, do you mind? Is it a problem that we do it on Mother's Day? I said, no, you know what? This is my happiness to do this. So therefore, what a better way to spend my Mother's Day than doing something that makes me happy?
Absolutely.
And that's really, I think as all of us healers, we have to really make that shift into moving away from the idea that we have to be so focused on helping the world and understand that that whole thing about when we change ourselves, we change the world. And when we are making ourselves happy and focusing on that happiness, we change the world.
Excellent. And thank you for that segue. By the way, just before we leave these comments, I find it very amusing when people say, isn't that funny? And what they're really saying is, I got the same vibe as you. And we always say it's funny. So watch out for when someone says it's funny. It's really the spirit world sending two people the same message at the same time, because of course we are all one. And I find that so amusing that we call it funny instead of using another word. I think that's a word that will shift in the future, because it's not really funny. It's rather interesting. It's rather fascinating that when I say something, it's something that you've been going through. And when you say something, it's been something that I've been going through, because I think the veil is getting thinner. It's being pulled back, and we are connecting in an energetic way that we never had before. And, when you talk about what's going on inside of us, the message that you have picked for us, Nadia, is which one?
It's about self-love.
Right. Yes. And the title of it is Reconnecting with Your Unconditional Self Love. And I will say that what is fascinating is that all those listeners to the podcast may recognize this message, because we've done a couple of podcasts on this message. Lori Appleby chose it, and we actually did a couple on that. And when Nadia said, that's the message that I'd like to talk about on the podcast, my ego came up and said, oh, wow, we've already done that one. I'm not sure. But of course, I took a deep breath and I said, okay, Spirit, okay, Shaltazar, I give up. If that's what we're supposed to talk about, more about reconnecting to that unconditional self-love so we can change the planet, then we're going to do it. And I'm going to get out of the way and allow us to have this conversation. And that message is a fascinating message to me. I keep listening to it over and over again, because there are two very distinct parts, and we'll talk about it in a moment. The first part is around us connecting to the unconditional love that is within us, that is planted within our DNA upon incarnation. But the second part of that message is then suggesting that after we have connected to that unconditional self-love, we can shine it out into the world, and that will have an effect on the transition that we on planet Earth are now going through. Tell us a bit about your impressions of that message, why you chose it, and share some thoughts about it with our listeners.
Sure. One of the things that I feel like we often battle with is we think that the things that we're doing are about loving ourselves. And as I was listening to the message that Shaltazar had for us around that, and going back and reading through the transcription, listening again, and really trying to understand it, what I realized is the reason why we have such a difficulty with that. And it really went back to this idea. I don't know how many people feels this way when they receive this from other people, but sometimes that idea of you have to love yourself and make yourself happy seems to be a message that actually hurts to hear. Like, it physically hurts our hearts. And I don't know how many other people can relate to that, but I know that often that is what I had experienced. Somebody telling me that I have the capacity to make myself happy and that I don't need anybody else. And that really shouldn't hurt. And hearing, Shaltazar say that as well about, how we have that capacity, it was like that next level of energy. Of course, I then felt the energy that Shaltazar was actually giving as part of the message. So even just beyond the words, there was a layer of energy that was coming through that was actually very empowering and uplifting. But upon further reflection and like really digging into that message and this idea and why it hurt, that's when the real exploration started to happen for me. And it was in that I discovered that there's actually layers of self-love. And I think that the same way that we are following on our own journey is the same way that we are connecting to deeper truths when it comes to self-love, when we decide to make that shift and begin to love ourselves. A lot of people you'll find will define what self-love looks like. But what I find is that the reason why that there's layers to it is because I think that truly embodying the idea of self-love doesn't just happen overnight. I think it's a process that actually takes place as we're making that conscious effort to love ourselves more. And the reason why I say that is because I decided years ago, back in 2016, I hated myself. It was the easier way to exist because when I was growing up, people had been so cruel and mean, and my self-preservation, my survival instinct was to hate myself more than anybody else could so that it wouldn't hurt as bad when other people were hating on me. And the problem with that was that worked back then for me to survive. But then now, being a full-fledged adult, the choices that, we began making based on that really kind of sets us up where how are we supposed to function and make choices that are healthy? And that was, I think, the biggest lesson for me. So as I, began looking in the mirror and telling myself, I love you, looking at my reflection, I tell you, I bawled. I was so, it was so hard to say I love you to myself, to look in the mirror and do that. And I've even run across other people who I've asked that to, and, have you ever done it? Have you looked in the mirror and you said, I love you to yourself? And, it's not surprising that I hear other people say, no, I don't know if I even can. And that's the whole thing. And so that's like the steps, the initial steps that we take to begin that process of loving ourselves, but it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, now you're talking about 2015, 2016, fast forward, it's now, 2019, and I'm still learning new levels of what self-love looks like. Releasing codependency, understanding that, especially a lot of us as children, we have come to this place where something happened. Maybe it was, our family, our parents fighting or something. And it created in us, because the hurt was so bad hearing it, that we decided that we needed to fix everybody. We needed to do things to make everybody happy. And so that level of codependency was created, because then out of necessity to feel better for ourselves, we felt that we could do that best by actually making everybody else feel better. And, what ends up happening with that is there becomes this codependent nature. We lose sight of boundaries. And so you really can't love yourself if you don't have those boundaries in place. But we're unaware. We're unaware that we're doing it, and we're unaware that we don't have those boundaries. And so we have to go through levels and phases in order to peel back layer after layer that leads us to understanding what self-love needs to look like for us. One level, so like one level is just being able to say, I love you, and believe it. And really, a lot of us have to fake it till we make it. And that's okay. I mean, did you ever have that, Jeffrey, where you had to kind of go through that process?
Oh, 100%. And I'm just sitting here listening to you, Nadia, and you've packed so much in. So I'm going to encourage the listeners, when they listen to this podcast, you may have to go back over what Nadia has said and listen to it and re-listen to it and listen to it again, because you have packed in so much of what that journey to self-love is all about. And I'm fascinated, first of all, by what you said about it hurting. And I think it hurts because I think deep within us, we know we're supposed to love ourselves, but it hurts because we have been programmed not to. I don't know about you, but I mean, I'm a lot older than you. I was programmed that all of that self-love is really selfish. And it took me a long time. And I remember as well the first time I looked in the mirror and said, I love you. And it took a lot of times of repeating it. The late Louise Hay was famous for suggesting that mirror work and looking in the mirror and saying, I love you. So I think that's extremely powerful. The realization that we are not taught self-love, we need to remember self-love, because Shaltazar says that self-love is in every cell of our body. It's in our DNA. The other point I want to make, which I think is very, very powerful. Lots of what you said is powerful, but the other one that I'm nudged to talk about is those layers of self-love. And Shaltazar often talks about, and I love layers because I think layers reminds me of an onion, and Shaltazar says all life is circular, but I'm reminded of the Kabbalion that talks about the principle of polarity, and that everything is a continuum. So there's no such thing as love and whatever the opposite would be, which is not love. There's a continuum between not loving yourself and loving yourself fully. So of course there's going to be layers and layers and layers. And I don't think there's a human being that ever gets to that point of pure unconditional self-love all of the time. And Shaltazar would tell us that it's all the journey towards a greater sense of self-love, not the definitive, not the polarity of unconditional self-love. They've even shared with me that unconditional self-love is either impossible or extremely hard to get on planet Earth because of the duality, and that unconditional self-love exists more in the higher realms. And there is a line in this that I go back to all of the time in this message. It says, if I truly loved myself unconditionally, I would. And they say, now fill in the blank. And I think that's something that I would encourage people to journal, to reflect, to ruminate on is continue to ask yourself, if I truly loved myself fully, I would. And I think that will help us remove some of these layers, as you say, because we need to shed all of the unloved feelings that have popped up in our lifetime and let them go in order to find the true self-love.
Wow. That's a beautiful sentiment. And what I love about that is it's that constant. One of the things that you just said that really stands out for me is the idea that it's not so much about attaining that ultimate level of unconditional love. It's about the journey of going back to remembrance of what those levels of unconditional love can look like and what they can feel like, and how amazing, at least that's what I have experienced. For me, coming to having these aha moments are amazing, because it's exciting, really. It's like, wow, this exists. And it's almost like a kid on Christmas morning that unwraps a gift, and it's like the best gift in the world, where that's what this experience has been like for me, learning the levels and seeing that there were layers of unconditional love. That was like Christmas morning. And I still feel so amazed by that. Like, I was thinking back and I was like, okay, this just happened like 2 or 3 weeks ago. How did that happen? How did I get there? And how do I bottle that so I can remember it later on when I need to like douse myself with some of that,
Right. And then we're going to get into the second part of this message, which is, now that you've got it, how can we get more converts? How can we get more people thinking like you and I are? Because you can tell from our conversation, and I know the listeners will, that we're converted, that we believe this, that we're not just saying this stuff, that it is coming from that inner knowing within us. And that's because we've done some work on the layers. And the question is really, how can we get more people thinking and feeling this way? Because Shaltazar talks about, actually, it was interesting, the analogy. They talk about the final mixture of this new world order, because Shaltazar has led me to believe that we are definitely moving into a new world order, and that we will be creating a different world, just like we did after World War I, after World War II, after, in this message, it talks about the 60s. We go through these cycles where we create a new world order. Now, what will that mix be? Will it have more light or will it have more dark? And Shaltazar, my interpretation of what Shaltazar was saying through me is, it's like you scramble an egg, and sometimes you get those omega-3 organic eggs, and they're a deep, deep yellow color. And when you whip up your scrambled eggs, the final mix is very dark. Whereas if you had an egg with a lighter yellow center, the final mix is a little bit lighter color. And so therefore, the reason that we are doing this work, and I think it's fabulous, Nadia, that you're doing it and sharing it with other people, the reason we're finding that self-love is so we can turn it on the world, and the new world order will look a little bit kinder and gentler, more empathetic, more compassionate.
Yeah. And isn't that what we all want? I think anybody who wants to see a better world, a world where people are happy and you don't have all this hate and all this darkness. I think at the core of us all, that's what everybody wants. I think the problem is that there's the muddied waters that everybody's been living in. And so that lack of awareness that there's a better way, that there's a better way to exist. I think that momentum is still in process of being built up. And I think that as more of us are like beginning to make those shifts and keep doing our internal work, the more and more that momentum will build energetically until there's an explosion, creating what Shaltazar says, that this new world, this new earth, as Dolores Cannon had coined it before. And I think I've heard many other seers and people talk about that as well. It is a good question. I think it's a very deep question. How do we turn that light all that happiness and all that joy, that love of ourselves that we're finding, how do we turn that on the world? I think and feel that part of that process is the consciousness of when we're experiencing it, the intent to share it with the world, to say, this feels so amazing, and having that consciousness that I imbue this same feeling on the world, and just having that consciousness. I don't necessarily think that it has to do with going out and I think a lot of times people think, well, I need to go and convince somebody, kind of like when you think about people who become a part of a new religion, they become so into that religion, and they're, the converts, and they get very excited about what they're learning and they're feeling, that they go out and they kind of coerce people into it, and that doesn't work. There's resistance and there's struggle, but what does work is if you're showing up outwardly, getting involved in environments where you can be your true authentic self and be that happy self, you'll emanate that energy outward to all of those around you. And people are going to be gravitating to it. They're going to come up to you and be like, what do you do that makes you like this? How did you get like this? And that's when you realize that your energy of happiness becomes that catalyst for other people, because they start gravitating to it like moths to a light.
Yeah, it's like when people come up to you and say, "What are you on? Can I get some?"
Right.
It reminds me of a story when I was first on my journey of self-discovery, and I realized the paradigm shift that I could love myself, and self-care and taking care of me first is really important. And I was living in Ottawa at the time, and I remember I was walking around the streets of Ottawa, and I booked myself a massage. And then later in the day, I booked myself a pedicure, and I'm a man, and who gets a pedicure? It was my first pedicure. And I remember when I was finished both of those, that massage and that pedicure, I felt so great about myself. I went right down, we lived in downtown Ottawa, and I went down to the market, and for anyone that knows Ottawa, there's this beautiful market area, and I bought 2 giant bouquets of flowers, one for my wife and one for my mother, and I proceeded to go over and give one to my mother and give one to my wife. And I was, still processing some of the hurt and challenges I had with my upbringing with my mother. But that experience of loving myself, I just couldn't help myself pouring out in gratitude and sharing that feeling in the symbol of flowers with someone else. And that, brings us to what you said yesterday was Mother's Day, and I saw so many people walking around with flowers, and I couldn't help but wonder, were you giving those flowers from a place of love, or were you just giving those flowers from a place of responsibility and obligation to a mother? And I really look forward to the day where we're bringing flowers to our mothers, our wives, to our husbands, to giving to our kids, sharing the beauty of flowers in nature with as many people as we can every day of the year. And I think that that's what Shaltazar is talking about. We have the ability, when we go within and cultivate that self-love, to just want to burst it forth and shower it on the world.
When you say that, which is such a beautiful sentiment, it really reminds me of this one day that I woke up, and it was my birthday. It was a couple years ago. I don't think I had ever woken up to a day of my birthday with this much feeling of abundance, of unconditional love that was pouring out of me. I felt like this vessel that just wasn't even big enough to contain the amount of love that I felt that morning. And it wasn't because of anyone externally. I literally woke up and must have had like the best spiritual connection while I slept with Divine Source, because I woke up and all I could think was how happy I was and how I wanted to share that energy with everybody because it was too much to contain. And, you know, it was like I was looking for ways, who can I share this love with? And I ended up like writing this blog about it. And I was like, you know, I'm crying as I'm writing it because I'm like, I'm so filled with so much love. And I just want everybody to feel it. And, you know, it's like literally people would post happy birthday and I would be like, oh, thank you so much. I love you. How are you? And so I was like finding all these different ways where, you know, a lot of times on Facebook, you know, you'll get a lot of posts of people that will wish you happy birthday. And some probably do it out of obligation the same way, you know, people buy flowers. But that didn't stop me from being in such this place of wanting to share that love that I was reaching out to people. And as they would say happy birthday, I would turn it and make it about them and be like, how are you? And how's your life? And, you know, it's great to connect with you. And it also reminded me of this idea that sometimes you'll see in locations where somebody will pay it forward at like a drive-through. And then like the whole day you see that being paid forward, and everybody that goes to that drive-through, they're feeling so good from the fact that somebody else paid it forward for them, that they jump on that beautiful, loving energy and they start doing the same thing. I was a part of that once at the Chick-fil-A over here by me. And it was just beautiful. And those are all like ideas and ways that we can take the love and the happiness that we feel and we can share it with people. A smile, being that person that smiles, that waits and holds the door for somebody behind you. There's so many little things that we can do that impart that loving energy and spread it in the world. And I think that the chain reaction will be immense and amazing.
And I hear you, and I love that. But one of the things that's important to realize is that when you go within and reconnect with your unconditional self-love, you don't even have to think of the things that you want to do or should do to share that love. It's just a natural outpouring. And I know there's a lot of movements, and I think it's great, you know, to give someone a hug or to do a pay it forward. And I think they're wonderful. And they're more, I think, really a fake it till you make it, because, and both of us have experienced these waves of reconnecting with our unconditional self-love. And I think you would agree with me, there's no thinking required in how you're going to share that love. It just comes out of you. It's just natural. There's absolutely no thought process to say, oh, I'm feeling amazing. What am I going to do today to share it? You didn't think about the responses that you gave on Facebook. They just naturally came from that place of love.
Absolutely. There was definitely no conditioning in it. But that's why it's like you say, we have to do the work on ourselves first, because it will start with us.
Right. And I think there's another point I would like to make, and that is the fact that so often we look for that love outside of ourselves. I don't know about you, but I looked at it from my father, my mother, from siblings, from friends. We spend so much time trying to find that love, thinking that if we are loved, then everything will be fine. But, and again, I'm not sure about you, but I reflect on some of the circumstances, the experiences in my life where that happened. And I compare that to the self-love, and there's no comparison. No matter what it is that someone does to me that might be nice, give me a birthday wish, bring me some flowers, give me a compliment, it kind of feels nice, but not as deep and not as full and not as meaningful is when that love comes from within yourself. And of course, you know, the thing about it coming from someone else is it's so fleeting. And I remember, and I've shared this story a number of times, once when I was redoing my website, I was going in to post some testimonials. And I was not in a very good mood that day. And I really didn't believe anything those testimonials said. And it was like, oh, they're just saying it, you know, because I asked them for a testimonial. And a week or so later, I had the opportunity to post another testimonial. And that day, I was really feeling full of self-love. I happened to reread the same testimonials I did a few weeks earlier, don't know why, and they brought a tear to my eye. Mm-hmm. And so it is not what you know, we spend so much time looking for that attention, looking for that recognition, looking for that love outside of ourselves. But what it brings you is not nearly to the level of when you reconnect with your unconditional self-love within you.
No, you're absolutely right. And I literally spent a year trying to get my emotional needs met by my boyfriend. And it was like, I'm so glad he was him, because it forced so much healing on me to recognize that codependency issue that I had. But what I'll tell you is the most impactful in all of what I learned, and I definitely encourage your listeners to spend time with this, inner child healing. Because a lot of the need for finding love externally actually is a result of our inner child that had some emotional, needs that went unmet. And I say some, but in some cases it's trauma. And in some cases, there's a lot of emotional needs that went unmet. And that left a scar on all of us, where as we get older, it becomes something we forget, but it doesn't mean it's not within us. And part of what I understand and what has been the most impactful for my own moving through these levels of self-love is embracing that child within me, that hurt little girl, and saying, I'm here with you, and you are loved, and you are safe, and you are accepted, and we are doing this journey together. And that, I'm like getting goosebumps just even saying that, because that's her, like that acknowledgement, like she moves through me. But that was huge for me. I had to keep doing that because I found that I'd actually been suppressing her and ignoring her, trying to move forward, kind of like an adult would do to a child. I'm the adult. I'm going to make the decisions. I know what's best. But at the same token, we're not validating ourselves by reaching out to that child within us and really loving up on them and loving up on the broken parts of us and loving up on the pieces of us that we've long ignored or forgotten for reasons of fear, trauma, whatever. And we have to really give them the extra TLC, those extra aspects to ourselves, because they need it the most. And coming together is what removes us being fragmented individuals to being fully whole individuals. And it is in that we will become empowered to understand that we can make ourselves happy and that we can meet all of our emotional needs. And like you said, Jeffrey, it is not fleeting. It stays with you. And it's so, the value of what that energy that we can give to ourselves is so much more powerful than what we get from other people, that we actually will find once we make that shift where we're like, well, that's it. Wow. I'm really appreciative for that. But you have that next level awareness of, man, I really can take care of myself better than anybody else can, But you still appreciate it, but still.
It's a wonderful time to be alive because we have this opportunity. I hope in some way that we are inspiring the listeners, if they haven't started their journey, to do so. If they're on their journey, to step it up a bit, keep working on that self-love, do the inner child work, let go of all of the inner traumas. It's not only important for you, but it is important for the next generation and the next generation after that. Please remember that how the world is going to turn out is based on how we show up. Nadia, we could go on and on and on. This has been fabulous. I really enjoyed it. I hope you do come back, choose another message, and join our listeners again, because you've been a fabulous guest, and I know we could go on and on and on. I love the topic of love. As a matter of fact, I'm thinking of starting another podcast called Let's Talk About Love, because I don't think we can talk about it enough. We need to shift the world to being a more loving, kind place. Nadia, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, what you're doing, how they can get in touch with you before we end today's podcast?
Absolutely. This has been amazing. And yes, we could go on forever. Loved this podcast. Love the topic. And I think it's great that you're starting that new podcast. So yeah, in addition to being a Reiki master and a holistic wellness practitioner, I am, like I said, I'm an intuitive. So I am really in touch with my psychic abilities. I'm a board certified hypnotherapist. And I'm also a sacred soul alignment practitioner, which is something that is done. I do a lot of past life healing work, because one of the things that I always try to help people understand is sometimes we're not just dealing with our baggage from childhood or early teen years and into early adult years. We're also dealing with baggage from past lifetimes that may still be affecting us in this lifetime. And so past life healing is a great tool for helping to go through and resolve and clear some of those contracts and energy cords that are connecting in a way that's not positive. I also have my own podcast. It's called Spiritual Tools for Your Physical Existence, where I am pulling messages of the week based on whatever the energies that come through. I provide intuitive guidance to create affirmations around that, as well as do a guided meditation hypnosis at the end. It's a wonderful way to really feel what I'm offering and the energy. All of my podcasts are infused with Reiki healing energy. You can find them on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and Castbox. So look me up. That's Spiritual Tools for Your Physical Existence. I have a presentation that I'm going to be a part of. It's called Elevate My Weekend, but it's worldwide. And that's coming up from August 4th to August 31st. It's actually going to be done, over the internet, but it's going to be international. And my topic is on Elevate My Magic. And so what I'm going to really be doing is I'm going to be talking about different tools about my life and how I went through my traumas, which were massive amounts over my lifetime, and how I used different tools to really elevate myself, my magic, who I am, the goddess that I am, and really come out to being who I am today. So that's available. The easiest way to locate that is on my website, nadiakimcoach.com, under events, and you'll see there's a link there if you'd like to register for that. And I think, that people can find me through my website. I think that's probably the easiest way. I'm also a published author, so I am working on a new book series. I do have one that's out called Book of Truth, and the first 2 books in that series are available on Amazon. And I'm just plugging away, just doing what makes me happy. I am following my happiness.
Nadia, I think you're doing more than plugging away. I think you're doing amazing work. Congratulations. And thank you on behalf of humanity for stepping up to the plate, connecting with your gift and sharing your gift with the world. It's truly inspiring. And I hope the listeners enjoyed listening to you, and hopefully they will get in touch with you. My name, once again, is Jeffery Eisen. I am the channeler of Shaltazar. You can check out all of the messages from Shaltazar on the website, shaltazar.com. There are 85 messages totaling over 19 hours. I encourage you to do so. I also do individualized, personalized Shaltazar readings where I bring in Shaltazar and give you a reading. I'm also a spiritual life coach, and I love helping people discover their self. As well, the podcast, the Shaltazar podcast, is available on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, on Libsyn, and on my website as well. Thank you all for tuning in. Nadia, big love to you. Thank you so much for talking about this amazing subject in such an amazing way. Thank you. Big love to you. Big love to everyone else out there. Please spend a little time thinking how you can bring more love into your life so you can spread more life to the world. Thank you.